I asked 800 players to analyze 3 positions and tell me what move they would play and why. We had players from all different skill levels participate, rated as low as 0 and as high as whatever number this is, but no, I did not include that in the dataset, so if you want your answers to be included, you'll have to use your real rating. I then broke all the players down into categories based off their rating, and in this video we're going to analyze all their responses. I'm also going to compare those responses to what I would have personally played in each of the 3 positions, and then we're going to compare that to what Stockfish says was the best move in each position. And speaking of Stockfish, to make this video a little more interesting than it already is, we're going to do a little competition between the viewers and Stockfish, but I'll get into that a little bit later in the video. Now, if you didn't already get a chance to participate, if you want, you can pause the video, go down to the description below, and click where it says this week's quiz, and that will take you right to where you can solve the 3 positions yourself, and then you can come back here and see how you did. There's also a link down there for next week's quiz if you want to get a jump start on that, which will be for the next video. Now, I know you're excited to see the results and get into the positions, so let's get started. All right, so first of all, here's a graph showing how I broke up the rating categories. You can see the 1,000 to 1,300 group had the most participants with over 250, but we had a pretty good turnout on all of them, with a little bit less on the over 2,000 group. So in the previous videos, I was only sharing the top move or the most common move in each of the rating categories, but some people were saying they wanted to see the top 2 or even 3 moves. So I made this fancy and somewhat complicated spreadsheet to give me all of those details. And if you're wondering, yes, it did take quite a bit of time and effort to make this, so if you do appreciate this video, it would mean a lot to me if you hit the thumbs up button. I think it helps YouTube know that this is a good video and they should show it to more people. And there's also a rumor going around that if you hit the thumbs up button, you become a better chess player, although the verdict's still out on that one. Anyway, I know you guys are excited to get into the position, so here we... Wait. Stop the video. I was hoping to avoid having this conversation, but I can't put it off any longer. See, I made the mistake of assuming that everyone knew how chess notation works, but clearly that's not the case. I saw quite a few errors in how people were recording their moves, and we really need to get some consistency for this data going forward, so we're going to have a 30-second mini lesson on how chess notation works. So in chess notation, pawns are always lowercase. So if you're gonna move a pawn, it's lowercase d3, lowercase d4, lowercase e3. You get the idea. When you're moving a piece, it's capital or uppercase. So uppercase R, uppercase N, uppercase B. And I know knights don't start with N. When you spell them, they start with a K, but we have a king over here. So the king gets the capital K and the knight gets the capital N. So just remember, you're a chess player now, so knights start with N. And lastly, when you're capturing a piece, you put a lowercase x to denote that something was captured. So now that we've discussed this, I shouldn't see any more of this. You can see how in this position, all 4 groups of people were trying to say the same thing, knight takes d4, but only one of them got it correct. So in the next video, if I see any of these shenanigans, you will be voted off the island, so please try to be careful. Okay, not really, but it's good just for you as a chess player to be able to do it correctly. If you ever go into like a real tournament, have to write these things down, you want to do it correctly. And also it really helps me with the data set to have accurate data that I don't have to filter through and try to figure out what was actually meant to be said and that kind of thing. So thank you all for listening to my rant on chess notation. Let's get back to the positions. All right, so here's position number 1. Again, if you want to participate, now's the time to pause the video, click the link in the description below. It'll take you right to the quiz and you can solve these for yourself. For everyone else who's already done that, here we go. All right, at the 0 to 1000 range, we had e takes f5 was a top move at 22%. Then we had bishop d8 and queen to c7. Now, before I talk about this e takes f5 move, let me just talk about bishop d8 and queen c7. So good job noticing that the bishop was under attack. It looks like most people saw that, and some of them wanted to just retreat the bishop to save it, so not a terrible idea. And also queen c7 had the same idea, defend the bishop that was being attacked. So good job there. Now, the best move was actually e takes f5, and I presume that most people who didn't want to play this move were afraid of, well, it just looked like, you know, they were going to lose their bishop, right? Well, it turns out that after the queen comes down here, there's a really nice move black has, rook to e8, which is attacking the queen, but also skewering the rook behind it. See, if the queen tries to move somewhere to safety, let's say over here to c5, well, then black just simply checkmates white. So that's not an option, and so white's going to have to lose their queen. So this was kind of the idea, to see if you noticed this rook move. And so for you players who said e takes f5, congratulations, that was the correct move. All right, now in the 1000 to 1300 range, we had 37% of players finding this move, and then queen c7 and bishop d8 were the next two moves as well. Moving on to the 13 to 1600, 50% or 51% of players found this move, and then again we had bishop d8 and queen c7 coming in at 12 and 8%. 1600 to 2000, we had 71% of players finding this and obviously probably seeing this idea. And if we go to the 2000 and above, we had 100% of players saying e takes f5. This was also the move that I myself wanted to play. I did notice this little skewer here at the end, and the fact that the rook is undefended leads to the back rank checkmate. And then if we check it against Stockfish, it does say e takes f5 is the best move, but bishop d8 and queen c7 were spots 2 and 3 when black still has an advantage, just not quite as good as if you saw this idea. All right, on to position number 2, 0 to 1000 group. The number 1 choice was queen to a4, and then option number 2 and number 3 was pawn to a4 or king to g1. So let me explain what's going on in this position for anyone who didn't catch it. The move queen to a6 is very annoying by black because it's pinning this rook. So white has, a lot of defenders on this pawn, 1, 2, 3. But as soon as the queen comes over here and pins this rook, well, now all of a sudden these two have been eliminated. So black has the threat to just capture the pawn. Additionally, this pawn is hanging, so this is kind of like a fork that's attacking, not really a fork, but a double attack on both of these pawns. And so there's not a lot of easy ways to deal with it. So some players who recommended the move a4 probably were trying to save this pawn. The problem with that is now this can be captured. So just knight takes e5, and white can't really do anything about it because this rook is pinned, and so if you take, black just takes and you're in trouble. So that's why a4 doesn't really quite work. The other move, king to g1, is a good idea to get out of the pin, but you're leaving this pawn undefended, and so you're basically just losing a pawn if black wants it. And Stockfish also likes the move f6 to just add another attacker on the pawn, because now you can't take it, or this is hanging. You don't have enough defenders. So that's why king g1 doesn't really work. So for those reasons, the only move that white can really play to kind of save the position was queen to a4. And the point is, the point is that after you play queen to a4, black can't just take this pawn anymore, because then you trade the queens and there's no more pin, your pieces are fine, and you can just take everything and you come out on top. So queen a4 kind of forces the issue with there, and then also you're blocking off black from taking this queen, so you're dealing with both of the threats with that one move. So for those of you under 1,000 who found this move, congratulations. That's actually a tough move for a lot of beginners to find, bringing the queen all the way across the board. So really good job there. If we move to the 1,000 to 1,300 group, you can see that the most common move was actually king to g1, and then queen a4 was the second move, and then a4 was the third. So more players in the under 1,000 category actually found this, percentage-wise at least, than in the 1,000 to 1,300. 13 to 1600, we have king g1 being the number 1 move, then queen a4 coming in at number 2, and then knight to d4. Interesting idea, trying to kind of make some counterattacks happen. It doesn't quite work. It looks like, yeah, Stockfish just says black just simply takes the pawn, and black still has lots of pressure here. So knight d4 doesn't quite do it. So in the 1600 to 2000, we actually have number 1 move being king to g1. Number 2 is queen a4, and number 3 is this interesting move b4. And I guess the idea is to kind of counterattack the bishop here. It doesn't quite work because black can simply take, and if you try to take the bishop, then they just take the knight, which attacks your queen. And after you recapture, well, you've got too many attackers on your rook, and you're actually just losing a rook here, right? Because the queen just comes down. So it doesn't quite work, but interesting idea there as well. And then if we go to 2000 and above, 52% of players found the best move, queen a4, and then we had king g1 at 30%, and then b4 at 17%. Personally, I was recommending to play queen a4. I did notice both of the threats, and that was the only move that I saw that would kind of deal with them, so that's what I wanted to play. And if we check it with Stockfish, that is indeed the recommended move. All right, position number 3. I actually was thinking that more players were going to be a little bit afraid of the position of the king and make some moves over here, like bishop g7 or some sort of defensive moves. But it turns out that everybody pretty much was on the right track here. So 0 to 1,000, the top move was knight takes d4, which is very aggressive, opening up the rook to attack here, also setting up a nice fork. And so really good move. Second move was queen takes d4. And then the third move was king to g7. Now, knight takes d4 and queen takes d4 I think are pretty straightforward. You're just taking a free pawn and also bringing a piece kind of into the action closer to white's king. I presume that the move king g7 was to try to prevent white's queen from coming down anywhere here. But really, you already have this square covered. You already have this square covered. The only place it can go is right here. But you can just block with the bishop, and the bishop actually does a pretty good job of defending your king. Now, there is this h-pawn which can come down and put some more pressure, but knight takes d4 is such a strong move because this is a very big threat, right? Because if you take that, well, then you're getting a skewer and you're also going to win the rook, and then the rook's going to help defend. And so really white doesn't have time to go with this plan, right? Because then this is just going to be too strong. And I'm looking at the engine now, and it actually said there's mate in 5 for black after you take the bishop. So it would just be game over if white tried to do this plan. So to everyone who found knight takes d4, congratulations. If we check the 1,000 to 1,300 range, again, number 1 move, knight takes d4. It's like number 2, queen takes d4. And number 3 was knight to e7, trying to bring the knight back to defend. So not a bad idea, but like we already talked about, the threat here was just too strong that white couldn't even really have time to attack you. So that's why that was the best move. 13 to 1,600, again, number 1 and 2. And then some players said knight to b4, interesting idea. Going to a different place, but also unleashing the rook. So not a bad move there. 1,600 to 2,000, we had 69% saying knight takes d4, then queen takes d4, and then knight takes e5, a couple people. And then 2,000 plus, 78% said knight takes d4, then queen takes d4, and then knight takes e5. Personally, I recommended knight takes d4. I just thought, hey, let's take the pawn. It looked very aggressive with lots of options, opened up the rook, and I didn't see a whole lot over here for white. I thought I was going to be able to defend just fine with the bishop. So that's why I recommended that. Stockfish actually has been jumping around when I've been analyzing it, depending on the day. It did say knight takes d4 was the best move, and right now, at this moment, it's saying knight takes e5 is the best. So, and then knight b4 actually is also up there as well. So Stockfish isn't quite sure, but basically moving this knight anywhere is really, really good because the threat on the bishop is strong. So both of these moves, and even this, were really good for black. So congrats if you found any of those. All right, guys, do you remember how I said earlier we were going to do a little competition against Stockfish? Well, here's how this is going to work. I'm going to take all of your moves combined across all 3 positions, including all the rating ranges. And if more than 50%, let me say that again, if more than 50% of everyone guessed Stockfish's move correctly, we're going to count that as a victory. And if it's less than 50%, we're going to say we lost to Stockfish. So let's go see how we did. All right, so for position 1, we had 46.9% of players matching Stockfish's move of e takes f5. Pretty good, not quite at the 50% mark that we're trying to get to win the match. But we still have 2 more positions to look at, so let's see how we did in those. All right, position number 2 was a tough one. Only 23.4% of players suggesting the right move, queen a4. On this one, king g1 seemed to be the tricky move that fooled a lot of players, and not everybody found queen a4. So that's going to really bring the average down, but let's check position number 3. Okay, position number 3, we did pretty well, 48% matching, and for this one, I said any of these moves, knight takes d4 or knight takes e5, I counted it as matching Stockfish since Stockfish was kind of jumping around, but not quite good enough to win the match. If you take the average of all of those 3, you end up with 39.4%, which is a loss for us. And I'm actually going to start tracking these stats. Let me pull over my spreadsheet. The first match against Stockfish was a loss, 39.4%. We had to get to 50. Maybe next time we can do better. Speaking of which, if you haven't signed up for next week's quiz, the link is in the description below. Make sure you go ahead and sign up for that. Also, let me know what you think about this viewers versus Stockfish thing. Is it a good idea or not? I'd be interested to hear your feedback. But yeah, as always, thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.